Good morning, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Build and Buy webinar. Really excited to dive in and have an open and honest and fun conversation about how the health tech community can come together and deliver better healthcare. Each of us in healthcare, and we have the opportunity to work with and meet with thousands of healthcare builders in so many verticals, are all united by the fact that we want healthcare to be better. And today, really privileged to have three strong and incredible builders join us to chat about their direct experiences and decades of years of experience, weighing the pros and cons and options and variety of tools and technology platforms available to help us achieve goals. And what I've learned at the end of the day is that the only thing that matters is delivering clinically excellent care and making it easy, affordable, and accessible to patients. And that's ultimately what unites each and every person on our panel today and in our audience today. So I'm really excited about, several years post-COVID, post-initial wave of health tech innovations. Now it's boots on the ground. Let's get to work and deliver better healthcare together. And talk about ways to build and scale in today's world in order to make a positive impact. And that extends to builders in behavioral health, women's health, nutrition and coaching, MSK, family care, pediatrics, and every single vertical in healthcare. We at Healthie are excited about being able to support the next generation of healthcare and the next set of builders. So without further ado, wanted to kick things off and introduce our panelists and have them talk about their experiences as well. First, we have Emma, who is the co-founder and CEO of Mavida. We have Brittanie, who's director of ops at Kaia, and Jake, who's director of strategy and BD at Two Chairs. So I'll kick things off and have everyone introduce themselves. Emma, why don't you go first?
Thanks, Erica. So happy to be here and have the opportunity to chat. I am Emma Sugerman. As she said, I am co-founder and CEO of Mavida Health. We offer virtual maternal mental health care for the path to parenthood. I've made my career broadly in digital behavioral health, leading strategy and operations at Headspace, LifeStance Health, and Charlie Health most recently before co-founding Mavida. And my path was really informed by my path to parenthood. And so really thrilled to have found this subspecialty and to have Healthie as a partner in our building. We are a pre-seed seed stage organization, so we are early days yet, and excited to chat more. Pass it over to Jake.
Hi all, my name is Jake Powell. I'm Director of Strategy and Business Development at Two Chairs. Two Chairs is a hybrid outpatient adult psychotherapy group. Really excited to be here today. I come to Two Chairs by way of McKinsey, and before that I was in revenue cycle. So been in healthcare my whole life effectively. And, it's such an important topic. We talk about how, we and a lot of the other folks in the space, we're tech-enabled services. And that tech-enabled part, it's so important, and it's, it builds a lot of the surfaces that we have, not only with our patients and with our clinicians as well. And that's how we deliver good care. And so I think, making these decisions, build versus buy, build and buy, so important, and oftentimes sets the trajectory for where we end up in the quality of our care delivery, the experience of our clients, the experience of our clinicians. So really excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Erica, and yeah, looking forward to getting into it.
I'll go ahead and take the floor then from that. I'm Brittanie Kraft. She said I'm Director of Operations over at Kaia Health. I actually started my healthcare career as a nurse, an ER nurse, and went on to work for some clinics where I got into the chronic care management space. So chronic conditions like COPD, MSK, that's what led me over to my journey at Kaia. At Kaia now I oversee all the care and clinical operations as well as our customer operations. So as you can imagine, the tooling and the decision to build or buy in all of those spaces usually come up on a weekly basis. And so that's what led me to searching out for a solution that would fit for what our value and delivery system, what would kind of support our value and delivery system at Kaia Health.
It's no surprise, and this has been the topic of conversation over the past several years, that healthcare is going through unprecedented innovation coming out of COVID. COVID accelerated so many overdue levels of innovation, overdue conversation, this overdue level of, okay, wow, we need to open up the curtain, peel back the curtain of healthcare and say what we've been doing is insufficient. We can talk about things like value-based care. We can talk about things like longitudinal virtual-based care. The fact that a physician-centered approach to healthcare is insufficient. I often use the example of having a baby because I recently had my second baby as being emblematic of a lot of the challenges in our healthcare system today. And when I was pregnant with my first, you go to these OB-GYN visits, they use Epic, and you kind of meet with your OB-GYN once every 6 to 12 weeks, depending on how things are going in your pregnancy. You go to the hospital, have your baby, and then you get that one postpartum visit 6 weeks after delivery. And I know during that experience, I personally was constantly asking the question of what else is out there for support and care. So I personally assembled a care team of a therapist, a doula, a lactation consultant, and a health coach, and said, I need support. And that is emblematic of what I think the healthcare industry needs in so many ways. And it's incredible to see all three of your organizations taking your own spin on delivering that virtual first, innovative, longitudinal, collaborative care, bringing together multiple stakeholders of the healthcare system in pursuit of better healthcare outcomes. And that is ultimately what we all need collectively. So when we think about the tooling, Healthie is one of just many platforms that and EHRs and options out there for builders to usher in that next gen healthcare. And for so long, the conversation has been build versus buy, but if we take a level up and we think about the fact that, health tech is going through what consumer tech and fintech went through 5, 10, and 20 years ago, where tools like Shopify just changed the way that people could really think about focusing on their core value proposition and not focusing on back-end infrastructure that just wasn't differentiated. That is what I think ultimately we're working towards. So I'm curious to, hear your perspectives 2 years post-COVID health tech innovation. Is the build versus buy question even the right question to be asking, given where we're at today?
Okay. I think it depends, right? That's always the answer. I think it depends on what side of things you're looking at, and build versus buy versus partner of it all really comes down to what are we talking about? What piece of that journey? What is your organization's special value that you bring to the table that only you can deliver on? And how do you think of the different steps then, as you said, along that journey that contribute to that value and how you get it to the patient? So ultimately, when I think of sort of the broader build versus buy versus partner of it all, it's what do I have to own? What can only I deliver? I think your point is well made that a lot of this journey, and I think this is a good thing, although like kind of a dirty word, a lot of the journey has become commoditized. We're sitting on Zoom, right? Has Zoom potentially become a word like Kleenex, where you like no longer remember what the generic word for the thing is, right? Like, is there a need for me to recreate Zoom to deliver care virtually? Probably not. That's not really what brought me to market. What is my unique value proposition? Am I uniquely getting specialized mental health care that understands a very specific population and journey point? Yeah, that's it, right? And so then I think about all the tools that allow me to deliver that care, allow me to scale that care. And that's where that answers my question for me. What do I have to own? What have other folks already built really sustainably and strongly that I can leverage? And again, at the end of the day, what's my number one goal? It's getting that value and getting those outcomes for the patient. And what's the best path to doing that? And I think that kind of illuminates where I buy, where I build, where I have to own for me.
Yeah, I love that, Emma. And I agree fundamentally too, that, when we were looking at, I always think of it like you can build anything with the right people, with the right resource. But what are you really good at? And sometimes I think that we use the word innovation and scalability in the market in the same way. And as an operator, I'm well aware of the fact that in order to, drive innovation, a lot of times there's a lot of clunkiness that happens where you're really trying to figure out like, what is the real patient need versus what is also the provider need, right? So there's two type of user bases and a lot of the innovation that we're looking at. And so one of the things that I really try to anchor myself on is kind of the same way that I'd like to do hiring, which is what do I feel really, really secure in my skill sets in? And then when I'm interviewing, if I feel some sense of, insecurity in what a skill set that somebody else has, that's usually what I hire, right? Like how can I go ahead and fill the gap that maybe we don't have the skill set or the resources in, but it's a fundamental need to innovate and to scale to the next level.
Yeah, and I think big plus one to that, Brittanie, especially on the provider facing piece. I mean, they're such a big user of the EMRs that keeping them in mind when we make these decisions, it's so important, and keeping them in the room while we're making these decisions. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more later today. The only other thing I'd add, Erica, you alluded to this with your question, is it the right question, build versus buy? And, the title of this kind of tips it off. Build and buy, I think, is the right way to be thinking about it. 10 years ago, though, that wasn't really an option in a lot of ways. And, if you wanted to be truly tech enabled, if you wanted to do something innovative, you kind of had to do it yourself. And, that was why you end up with all of these in-house EMRs. And some of them were really successful, but you can see how it was a big drain on the bandwidth of these product teams. And so I think, we're kind of living in a new world where there's enough health tech or tech enabled services folks like ourselves, where there's now this ecosystem which Healthie is a part of. And it's super exciting to see, not only can I kind of pick and choose my own adventure, but also there are even places where, yeah, I could build this myself, but I actually think, for example, like Healthie is going to be better at this. They've done it before. And so, we could spend a year and a half building something awesome, or we could, pick something off the shelf that's going to be just as good or maybe even better because they've learned from other users here. So anyway, yeah, I think it's definitely a build and buy question, which is really exciting. It's a good place to be.
What's really interesting is that 10 years ago, the market didn't exist for these API first EHR platforms. And that was just because of where healthcare was, right? I say this internally to our team. I wish Healthie had existed 10, 20 years ago, right? Modern API first, designed for longitudinal care, and took a collaborative care approach to delivery. And then that just wasn't the way that healthcare had been thought of up until that point. And I think the tide is genuinely changing, such that companies like Healthie, and again, there are many platforms out there, can pave way to support this next generation of innovative care. And the way, I think through conversations with all three of you, the way you commonly think about this is that you need to work constructively with multiple stakeholders in your businesses, right? There's the developers and product teams, there's the clinicians, there are the administrators, and there are the patients. And going back to, what contributes to your differentiation, Emma, to your point, and Jake, to your, saying, hey, we could build this, but what's uniquely differentiating? I'm curious, and I think a lot of this is going to depend on the stage of company that you're at, how you all think about prioritizing patient experience, clinical experience, ROI distribution, and how you think about the levers.
Yeah, I can start there. So, one of the first things, like you mentioned, is just clinician experience that we think about. We also think about, clinical quality, and you mentioned interoperability as well. I mean, there's this massive framework that you can lay out of, what are each of these, boxes we need to check with our EMR, and what are the risks we need to mitigate. And I think, when we thought about these questions at Two Chairs, one of the things that I pushed us to do that I think helped us make a good decision here is, we almost put the build in-house in the matrix as its own vendor. So you can think about those costs in a like-to-like way. And that's always going to be the first question is, what do the costs look like? And I think, when you're thinking about the build piece, you almost have to say, okay, here are the costs. Maybe let's 1.5x or 2x it. It's always going to be harder than we think it is. And then going back to the more upside of things, you know, we think about that clinician experience and the clinical quality governance almost first. We have a really unique measurement-based care approach, and that's something that we have built in-house. And so when we were looking for our next EMR vendor, which ended up being Healthie very happily, you know, we had to find that right partner who could sort of build those connectors so that our tooling that we built for our clinicians and for our patients could actually just mesh really well with the pieces that we would be buying. And so that clinician experience almost comes first for us, because enabling the clinicians to have a good experience, being able to track their quality, and get them engaged with it. I think, you know, measurement-based care, unfortunately, in the therapy space, it's not the standard. And so it's easy to say we're going to take a measurement-based care approach. It's another to do the change management to get those clinicians on board with that approach. And so you have to make it as easy as possible and as friendly as possible, and also demonstrate that value. And so I think, you know, that was kind of one of the biggest pieces for us. And then it flows into the client experience or the patient experience as well. If your clinicians are unhappy, they're not going to be doing their best work, no matter how much they want to be. If your clinicians are having a hard time using your tooling, we've all had that experience where the clinician is spending more time staring at the computer than actually talking to the patient or the client. It's a huge differentiator. So that's one of the things that, you know, when we were asking ourselves these questions, was at the very top of the list. How are we going to enable our clinicians to enjoy using the tools? And how are we going to enable ourselves to track the outcomes that they're seeing with their patients, like the PHQ-9 and CAD-7? So not a comprehensive list, but I would definitely, you know, put that pretty close to the top for us.
Yeah. So go ahead, Emma.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I was so happy to hear you talk so much about the clinician space too, because as somebody who used to work in hands-on patient care, the experience that you have as to deliver the care is directly impacting the actual patient themselves. So if you can't actually execute care in a meaningful way, and if you're spending, like you said, more time in, you know, trying to figure out the tech side or on the phone with somebody trying to figure out why this isn't working or that isn't working in person or virtual, it's just frustrating. And so I think that was something that we thought about a lot, and really had to weigh what the tech resource on our own internal team looked like, and if our core product, would we have to go ahead and compromise that to build out something that was supportive on both ends. And I think that was a big thing that came into play years ago, and why we actually switched around some of our tooling at the time to be more flexible and to allow us to innovate on the product, but then support the provider at the same time. Go ahead, I'm going to pass it to you.
You can keep going.
So let's get really specific, because in our panel today, we have builders who are product team members, who are founders, who are director of clinical teams, director of strategy. And we are all asking ourselves these questions, right? So as we get to specific, as each of you participated in your companies taking off and generating real industry momentum, how were those decisions made at your company, build versus buy, tooling? Did it depend on the type of tool? And then what mistakes did you make? And candidly, what advice would you give to other organizations or your friends and colleagues who are making these decisions today?
Good question. I'll go. So I've actually in multiple roles leading up to co-founding Mavida, have always had the build versus buy versus partner of it all in my wheelhouse. So I've thought about this question for a long time, and like very practically, very specifically have thought of it on 5 dimensions. So I thought the 5 things that you kind of weigh the different decisions on: speed to market, cost, ownership, flexibility or optionality, and like capability feasibility match. Okay, so speed and cost and ownership makes sense. How fast will this be stood up? How much is it going to cost you? And I think Jake's exactly right. This isn't just for the buy versus partner of it all. It is also for the build. You have to look at everything there, like sort of apples to apples as much as you can. Capability feasibility match is how close does this solution get to what you wanted, which is to say, if you're to build it, of course, you're very likely to build exactly what you want. But if you buy your partner, is it like slightly off of what you wanted? Is it an exact match? And then optionality, how much flexibility do you have once you've made that decision? Can you easily pivot? And I think for me, so each of those things, and this is like how I approach everything in my life, so it's very telling, but each of those things I both give a score to, but I also weigh them. So how important, like those different dimensions are not going to be equally important for every decision point, for every time you're looking at a new vendor, a new partner, a new functionality. And so you have to weigh, for me, I weigh the criteria and I score them. Now, the other side of that, it leads to kind of the, I think the second stage of what you're asking is like, then what did you learn? What mistakes were made? That sort of thing. And I think for me, particularly at this very early stage as a first-time founder, I am fail fast and fail forward. Like recognize immediately this is not working and don't be scared to say, we got to change. Because at these earlier days, while it's still incredibly difficult, right? It's easier, dare I say, than it will be down the road to pivot and to pivot quickly. And I think it's so, so important to fail fast, even when I'm now, entering conversations, whether it's with partners, new broad partnerships, whether it's with investors. There's a lot of questions on like, what have you learned? And I think if you don't have an answer to that, right, because you're still testing everything out, because you still want to be right about everything, like that's more of a red flag than, we went to market this way, or we built this way and we thought it would work and it didn't. And we've already made that change. And so I think even in a small window to say, we pivot thoughtfully, but quickly is really important.
I love the 5-point framework. I think that needs to be the new gold
I was such a nerd about it.
of how companies think about these decisions. One of our genuine principles here at Healthie is we will never sign a customer on if we don't think it's a good product fit, and we don't always get it right. But I think genuinely going back to we are here to build 5 and 10-year partnerships with our customers. And we'll say this internally, we want this to be the last EHR migration decision you have to make, because it is, a really important decision. Nothing is irreversible, right? But it is a really important decision. And you want this to be a two-way street, because I really do believe that software is like an organism, right? We've been building here for 8 years. I still feel like we're just getting started. There are 10,000 things we will improve in our product over the next 8 years. That being said, the principles have to be there. And so as we work with prospective customers and current customers, we actually love getting the spreadsheets of all of the criteria that our partners are genuinely evaluating on. And so I've heard a lot of those dimensions that you mentioned, because if something is not philosophically right, we are the first to say, hey, I think you should use this platform. This is just not going to be the best fit for you as we think about our product roadmap 1, 2, and 3, 5 years down the road. Because I think that's what breeds genuine long-term success. And so that's just been a really important pillar for us at Healthie, to think about the types of customers that we can support the best.
That's the saying no is just as important as saying yes, perhaps more important sometimes.
That's exactly correct. Jake and Brittanie, anything to add? That was a great framework.
I love the framework, and I think we ended up using something relatively similar. So yeah, love the framework. I guess a couple of things that I'll add on here, and hopefully this first one is obvious, just in the tactics of making the decision. Go talk to someone who's been on the EMR that you're thinking about getting on, and figure out how happy they are. And don't just talk to their strategy team. Don't talk to me. Go talk to the product team and figure out, is this a 10 out of 10? What problems have you guys had? It pays off every single time. You're gonna find some EMRs where, and this is one of our first big mistakes that we've had in past relationships, we under-optimized for, I think, Emma's flexibility bucket. And within that, just the reaction time and the willingness to partner from the EMR side. And I think that's where you run into issues where not only can you not innovate in the direction that you want to go, but sometimes even just the blocking and tackling doesn't get done. If you're waiting 3 weeks for a bug fix, something's wrong, and you really need to start thinking about moving on to the next one. And those types of questions, identifying the vendors that are going to be slow and that aren't going to be able to innovate with you, there's no replacement for a character reference or for a vendor reference. You got to talk to someone who's on it. And like I said, it should be obvious, But for the one person who's not thinking about doing this, please do it. It'll save you so much time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a pretty comprehensive with a lot of the views that I have on it too. But I think the one thing, and I people probably get sick of hearing me say it, especially on your team, Erica, but the flexibility is such a huge thing for me, and especially I think in the startup space and in some of the innovative kind of care delivery models, to get stuck in a pattern, or to get stuck in a way that you can't be flexible with changing, either with market tide or a different market fit. Maybe you roll out a new product and now that new product doesn't actually fit with some of the tooling that you have, and so just keeping in mind that flexibility, and that was kind of a paramount decision point for us, is how can we make sure that we keep our foundational product really, really secure, but if we're adding tools, that it either provides the sustainability long-term for regulation and privacy, but it also allows us to have some of that fun innovation and to not have to think inside the box constantly, even with our vendors. So looking at the roadmap, I love that, Erica, that you pointed that out. Looking at the vendor roadmap is huge, because where does it align? You could even have the same type of values as a company, but if you see that they're actually heading in a different direction than where you are, then I always think that that's like a good sign to maybe even reevaluate where you are with your tooling and vendors that you're using.
I want to switch gears to rollout and implementation. When we first rolled out Salesforce at Healthie, this is internally, we've been using Salesforce IQ for years. It was free. It was easy. It wasn't a thing to implement. The day we at Healthie switched to Salesforce and rolled it out, it was a beast. I never want to go through that again. New processes, things breaking, rolling migration of data. And in some ways, what I've learned is that picking a vendor is the easy part. And it's all about what comes around that decision, internally with the vendor, with, in this case, like with clinicians, with product and dev teams, and like thinking about the roadmap for years and years and years. And obviously, the metaphor continues because we continue to optimize our instance of Salesforce at Healthie. So I'm really curious about, what you all have learned about the rollout process of a vendor like Healthie or another example, and how you have brought together the stakeholders in your organizations to ensure smooth rollout and implementation.
I'll go ahead and take this one on, and maybe even touch back on the errors of our ways. And so I would say that one of the biggest things that I've learned in implementing any tool is that, when you've gone through the process of really vetting a vendor, and like now you've decided on it and you go to roll it out, you've done all the legwork of understanding the tool, right? So you've done the legwork of understanding how this could go ahead and fit into your strategy long term, and how it's going to go ahead and like you can see the big picture. That doesn't mean that everybody at the company does. And so I think that is something that you can never assume the level of understanding when you're implementing a tool across the different teams. And that's something that I've done wrong in the past is, I've gone into the implementation calls with a vendor, and as I'm hearing the SME talk about what they'll be using the tool for, I realize that there's a disconnect there. And so I would say that, internally is just as important for that initial alignment for the implementation as it is to then connect on that same wavelength with the vendor. And then kind of piggybacking on that, I would say that long-term vendor relationship, it's been like the most important thing is to just be direct about what your actual pain points and needs are. Because sometimes it's like, you're, especially being a vendor ourselves, and then also, having vendors, I think that you can get stuck in this thing where what it feels like to be on the opposite end of that. And so maybe you're not as direct about what your team's needs are, or what gaps you're really bumping into. And so I think that having those honest conversations with the vendor is just as helpful for the vendor as it is for you.
I think that's right. Particularly bringing along, as Brittanie said, like the various stakeholders from the earlier decision-making part, right? Bringing along, if we're making a strategic high level decision, we're bringing along the operators, the clinicians, the product and technology leaders, anyone, you know, the RCM team, like anyone who's going to have who's going to be impacted by that decision. So not just, you know, so there's buy-in certainly, but not surprises down the road. But then as you know, recognizing that the work of implementation is massive and not one note, right? And so that like, if I'm dropping something in a clinical leader's lap and saying like, good luck, we got Healthie now. I mean, like the reticence there, right? And the willingness to be flexible as a human and address problems and pivot, right? Like that's just much more likely to occur on a very human basis if one's been brought along the entire journey, even knowing that like, yes, we will have to make tough decisions. Not everyone's going to be happy at every turn. Not every single box is going to be checked in that matrix, or every single box is not going to get a 5 out of 5. But knowing that folks were brought along in that decision, that they felt heard, and that they knew perhaps even from pre-decision point that what the fix was going to be, or what the path to remedy was if something wasn't a 5, if something, you know, something that was important to them. Then when it comes to implementation time, again, fewer surprises, more buy-in, more kind of everyone marching in the same direction. Particularly at larger organizations, that can be a lot of people, but it's well worth the effort, particularly in the earlier stages, to get you to the implementation place in maybe a slightly less painful way.
Yeah, and maybe just 2 things I'll add on. I think bringing people along, and especially the clinicians, super important. But some of the tactics of like what does that actually mean, and how do you do it? I think EMR migrations, they oftentimes, you know, the mindset is this is something we've got to do, and it's going to suck, and it's going to be painful, and we'll make it through. I think, you know, taking a transformational mindset and really from the very top, having the CEO come in and say, look at all this upside that we're creating. We are going to make the processes easier for you, for the product team. They're going to be more responsive. For our clients, not that you're going to be communicating this to them, but communicating internally, our clients are going to have a better experience because of XYZ thing. If you set this up as just this painful process that you've got to go through, everyone's going to feel it that way. And you're constantly just going to be mitigating risks. Once you have that mindset shift where you kind of get up on the pulpit and you say, this is a strategic decision that we're making because of XYZ reasons, and it's going to allow us to invest in ourselves for over the next couple of years, it really changes the narrative. And then you can also bring the clinicians along and say like, okay, what do you want out of this? Like, let's talk about like, you know, in Healthie's case, like what are the things that, you know, are painful with our current vendor that we can't fix and that we will be able to fix with the next vendor, so that you can get that running list and really get their input. The second thing, and I'm sure everyone's already thinking this, but it bears repeating, set some attainable but aggressive.
Did we lose Jake?
Usually it's me, but yes, I think it's Jake this time.
He is saying his frozen screen looks saying
Yeah.
really inspiring. Okay, let's we'll give him a moment to jump back in.
Turn it into a win.
Hi, Jake.
Oh, did I cut out?
You did, but we can hear you now.
Okay. Just assume that everything I said was spot on and we can move
on. You know, I think flipping this on its head, you know, are there any times in this day and age that you think a health tech delivery company should build an EMR in-house, right? Because this first generation of health tech had to build in-house because there weren't these innovative API first platforms out there. What would be a case where you think, hey, you know what? It does make sense. And actually, I want to take a step back because I think that there are, you know, the concept of API first is really interesting. I'm a CEO of a health tech company. I've never written a line of code yet. I've become the biggest proponent of API first EMR. And the reason for that is we make available the same we make available the same API that we use to build Healthie internally. We use GraphQL to do this. And what that means is that product and dev teams at your organizations can literally build their own UI for clinicians and or for members. You can build into your own patient app, aka have the chat platform of your patient app that links to Healthie on the back end for clinicians to respond to chat. And that capability extends to scheduling, it extends to all of the hundreds of micro features that go beyond just a traditional EMR. And it's that longitudinal experience that organizations are able to facilitate leveraging an API first platform. And that's what saves the thousands and thousands and thousands of dev hours and allows organizations to focus on the business differentiation. And that is such a powerful statement to be able to make in healthcare because of the implications and ramifications on patient care and outcomes. We all can, I think Epic, for example, incredible software designed beautifully for hospitals, is an API first. And that's because the technology didn't exist for companies like Epic or Athena to be built in an API first manner, right? And so when we talk about this notion of API first, it really enables this concept of like headless EHR and building your own member experience to extend the capabilities and focus on that business differentiation. So all that being said, like, are there times in today's, and the answer may be a simple yes, no, but should someone build an EMR in-house, and what do you think the criteria for that would need to be?
I think, oh, go ahead.
Sorry about that, Emma. Yeah, I think we actually, I thought about that before, years ago before we signed up with Healthie, about what does that mean to go ahead and build it in-house, even, especially, we were at a phase where we weren't as big. We could have probably built something, but it was more a question about where could that resource be utilized better. And so for us, that was the real decision maker, right? Is that you think about your team, Erica, and how much effort and energy and time and tech resource it takes to go ahead and stand up what you guys have done. And so we would have had to do that exact same thing in that space. And so I always think of it like, could we, as a company, really think about where we could have spent that exact amount of time and hours and improve our core product and innovate in our core product, and then plug it together, right? So it gives you that ability to go ahead and move on the places that we felt we wanted to really put the time and energy and effort without compromising the patient security, the patient experience on the EMR side. So we did contemplate that, but I think that especially in a telehealth delivery or virtual first space, I don't know that I would lean into doing an in-house EHR or EMR.
Yeah, I mean, anytime someone starts talking about building their own EMR, I almost think about it as like the running joke of just like every post-college group of friends are like, should we buy a bar? And the answer is always no, but not always no. Occasionally it might make sense. It's hard to come up with that perfect storm where you have the scale and the skills and the bandwidth, and the opportunity cost isn't going to wipe out your core product. I'm sure that the answer is yes for some theoretical health tech company out there. But like I said, it's really hard to come up with an example where it totally makes sense when you have all these awesome options in front of you.
I think that's hilarious. I think that's absolutely right. My short answer is like, yeah, if you think you can build a better Healthie and that's your goal, like that's your target, do that, right? If that's your business. I think, again, going back to like, what are we all setting out to do? What is our unique ability to do that? And how do we quickly do that for the people who need it? Brittanie, what Brittanie said about like kind of just what else could you be using those resources for? That's exactly right. Now, if you want your business to be the EMR, phenomenal. You think you can do that better? I mean, Godspeed. There are plenty of people who should own bars, and they do, and hopefully will continue to. But that isn't each of us. We don't each have that differentiator, that key skill set, that unique value proposition or right to win in that space. And if that is your primary objective, absolutely, like keep building more things that we can leverage. But right.
Emma, I want to deep dive into Mavida because you have this experience as a founder today, but you've also worked at several other organizations prior to starting. How have you approached going to market, product market fit, and building out your team? Just very genuinely, like, what does your team consist of today? How do you think about your clinical team? How do you think about your product and dev team and your operations? Because for early stage founders, that's really the question of how do you go to market in this day and age in a capitally efficient way and get to product market fit. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your.
Tell us all the things. Okay, so I'm gonna sound a bit like a broken record because I go back to what are our key differentiators? What is the unique value that only we can bring? My co-founder, Dr. Sarah Orrick, is a perinatal psychiatrist by background. So she's one of very few maternal mental health or reproductive specialized mental health providers. And that was a really unique, that's a very unique skill set. It was our goal at the outset to provide comprehensive mental health care. That's one-to-one group, couples, and family therapy, as well as medication management and prescribing for the path to parenthood. And there are, solutions out there that do parts of that, certainly, or do all of that for different populations. And really the idea here was that this unique journey, while long viewed as very physical, has a massive hormonal and therefore psychological implication as well that necessitates specialized care. And then it's an audience for whom virtual care is particularly relevant. You think of, in particular, a postpartum mother. I know, Erica, you were just there. I couldn't get anywhere. Like on time, like that's nuts. And so you think of mom, baby, phone, just as broad sweeping generalizations, that made a lot of sense to us. Now we tested that, right? We spoke to a lot of referring providers, a lot of folks who'd been on this journey at every angle, everything from trying to conceive to the postpartum. And we were able to, again, really validate before investing, this is a pain point, this is a unique value proposition. How do we go to market? Who are the current stakeholders? What does current state look like? And how do we drive those values for those folks? That informed not just what we built, how we built it, and who we built it with. And it goes back a little bit to what Jake touched on early on. We have a real focus on measurement-based or outcomes-based care. And that means measuring from the ability to measure from day one, how the care that we are delivering is landing for our patients, how they are doing at many different points, not just like beginning and end, whatever that looks like, and to be able to pivot and adjust that care accordingly. So a team is myself and my co-founder, Sarah, who again, perinatal psychiatrist by training, and I'm the yin to her yang, business and operations side of things. We have 2 PhDs who lead both our clinical innovation as well as our research and outcomes. So again, all of that from day one, rather than like hey, wouldn't it be nice to say if this was good a couple of years later, as well as a couple other providers and sort of an all-around kind of like marketing, customer experience guru. So small team, but really focused on what are those skills we had to have immediately and what informed our go-to-market, which was largely through referral partnerships, right? We're leveraging those pain points where OBGYNs, pediatricians, midwives, these mandated screeners are being told you have to take care of this audience, but you don't have the training, you don't have the resources, you certainly don't have the time. So that really, that's a lot of, I think, what you asked. I think, like, what am I missing there? The Healthie of it all.
That's a great, that's the essence, because what I am hearing in a nutshell is we are focusing on clinical care and clinical outcomes.
That's right. It's no like coincidence that our CEO is a doctor. I mean, that half of our team is clinical. I have been in so many rooms, right, where it's like, oh, we should check with the clinical team. That is not how we run this organization. It is that we deliver clinical care. That's what we do. We also deliver non-clinical care, but at the core of what we do is patient safety and patient outcomes, because that's our unique value proposition. And you lose sight of that and try to be like everything to everyone in some way. I think that's one of the first things that commonly falls.
I think ultimately, this notion of health tech innovation and then the clinical are going to converge. And ultimately, we are all in this together in a clinician-led way, using technology to deliver better healthcare. But technology is never going to replace the relationship between provider and patient. It is going to augment and extend, and allow clinicians to be even more powerful and impactful in what they do. And I think that lens is true at Mavida, it's true at Two Chairs, it's true at Kaia, across the disciplines of care that you provide. And I think that's what's so special about this community of health tech builders. Brittanie, I'm going to go back in time. You have been working, Kai's been working with Healthie since 2019, and you actually, we got to know each other several years back, and then y'all ended up going with another vendor and then came back to Healthie a little bit later. So I'd be curious to hear about, your journey and process, like from that beginning and that decision, and what it's been like since.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, obviously, when we were initially starting, to look at some vendors for, it was actually for the coaching pieces. And so, how do we go ahead and select a vendor to deliver coaching sessions to people effectively? But at the time we were a very small team. And so trying to understand and leverage the complexity of our support side with the coaching. So, that was kind of ultimately the decision when we initially went with a different vendor, is we had a pretty in the box thing that we were trying to accomplish in that space, right? Our actual innovation at that time was our product. We were finding the product market fit. We were seeing how we could go ahead and take therapy and make physical therapy available and accessible to a broad range of people who are struggling to go ahead and get to appointments, or I've got 4 children. So for me to go ahead and focus on any of my aches, pains, or chronic conditions, it is an effort. And sometimes I'm going to choose my son's dentist appointment over my appointment if I have to go in person. So at the time though, that was our real focus, is how can we make sure that our product has the foundational pieces and it meets all the criteria that we have set to go ahead and deliver care through our app. And so within that box, it was easy. It was kind of like, okay, how can we find a turnkey solution to go ahead and make sure that we can execute on some of these patient contact points? And so, but as we started to use some of those other vendors, it became very clear to me fast that it was the right decision in the moment. But as soon as we started to really take off and see the direction and see the real big picture and the vision of what we wanted to accomplish as a healthcare company, I realized that we needed the flexibility, and we needed a little bit more rigor and thought behind how our clinicians would deliver that care. So, being within our product is a phenomenal experience because we put all of our effort and energy there. But as soon as we're like, okay, now how can we take that and expand and make sure that we're taking that access to the next level, maybe adding additional conditions, chronic conditions? That's where we circled back, and we really thought about how can we go ahead and leverage some clinical tools to go ahead and really make the impact of our clinical team more felt within the community.
You have all mentioned the importance of data collection and data outcomes and tracking data outcomes. And the way that we've seen outcomes reports at Healthie is across multiple dimensions. You may have the one pager that you need to send to your payers and health plans. You're going to have the one pager for your referral partners and for physicians that may have similar but different sets of data. You're going to show progress to the patients themselves and showcase the before and after of working with your program or your care team. I'm curious to hear, to the extent that you can share this, how y'all have leveraged Healthie's API to pull that data to create those reports, and what are the key categories that you're looking at, and how do you all think about putting together those outcome summaries?
I can maybe take this one first, just on a high level, but you know, obviously there's a lot of different instruments out there for different outcomes that we want to be measuring. And so I think one of the things that actually drew me to Healthie was the flexibility of being able to add additional instruments and additional validated tools, because that can be a hard thing to go ahead and not only collect the data on, but then also make sure that it's making sense for how clinicians really work. Because extracting data and getting those data endpoints, like you know, you can go ahead and you can ask a patient, like you said, you can do it in a form. You can also do it within our product, but making sure that there's a way for us to leverage all of that to actually impact patient care is, I think, the important piece. And so that's really where I think we've utilized it the most, is pulling some of the information that we have within our core product and making sure that that is being leveraged just as much as some of the outcome measures that we're measuring with some of the forms or clinical tools within the physical therapist delivering care, and then making that matrix available for the clinicians themselves. And that's why the API was really important for us there. So it's not just sending it one way, but also ensuring that we can send it the other.
Yeah, same here at Two Chairs. I think, you know, one of the build portions of our build and buy with Healthie is just where we capture data from our clients, those clinical assessments, and then also how we deliver that data back to the clinicians in our clinical decision support software. So they get little flags when, you know, maybe it's time to start thinking about graduation for a client. Maybe it's time to start thinking about escalating. You know, if there's a crisis outcome, then we need to know ASAP, right? And so because we're capturing that information elsewhere, putting it back into Healthie, and then pulling it back out of Healthie and giving it back to the clinicians in their platform, you know, that API setup makes that just super easy, so that we're appropriately and compliantly documenting everything, but we're not limited where we can't use our own data because it's locked in this little black box. So that's been probably the most instrumental. And then of course, Erica, you listed a bunch of other examples. Yes to every single one of those, and that's been great too.
Yeah, I'll just add, I mean, one of the things I love too, and would highlight here, is that it's not, we don't have to make every single one of these decisions from day one. We can start in a build or a build and buy, build and partner capacity, and learn, right? And gather data ourselves, gather data on the data. And then make different decisions down the road, or keep the same decision. I mean, part of the flexibility that we've seen with Healthie is that there's the right amount to get us started, right? There's a certain amount that exists within the platform itself. We like to leverage forms in serving up surveys to patients at specific intervals. We can get the data. It's very user-friendly. We're able to design our own UI on top of it. So it works very well for the clinicians because it's right there already. Works very well for patients because it looks and feels the way we want it to at the appropriate intervals. And then down the road, I think, as Brittanie highlighted, there's a lot of different tools that we can be leveraging that are even more sophisticated, that will allow us to do more. But there was like a baseline we had to do and wanted to learn from. And Healthie was like, it was very plug and play, like beep up, we just designed it on top. That's great. It's done. It's out there. Patients find it quite easy to use. And then in 6 months, again, particularly at this like early stage, if we've learned more, we want to do more, it'd be really cool to dig in on this specific functionality here. We can still do that. We're not trapped in kind of a one-way decision, a one-way street that doesn't allow us to pivot again later.
Thank you all so much for sharing your experiences today and just opening up and being honest. Going back to, we are all in this together. I genuinely mean that. We are all in healthcare because we want to see a better system. And that's what unites every company in health tech. And that's what unites all of us together. So really awesome to see Two Chairs, Kaia and Mavida, really build and scale care delivery. And we're so excited about what's to come. Thank you everyone for joining us today on this Build and Buy webinar. We hope you found it helpful and informative. I know that many of you signed up but can't join live, so we will be sending the recording out to all of you. And just wanted to say thank you again for taking the time.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
so much.
Thanks for having me. Emma, Brittany, I learned so much from you guys. This was great.
You as
Same.
well.
Thank you.